Hey everyone, let's talk about remembering things. Or rather, why we remember certain things so vividly while other things just vanish from our brains. You know that feeling of information overload, right? Like you're constantly bombarded with facts and figures, but struggle to hold on to anything truly useful.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Today we're diving into a book that might just have the answer. Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. They've unpacked the secrets behind those sticky ideas, the ones that grab our attention, make sense, and refuse to fade away.
What's fascinating is that the Heath brothers didn't uncover some complicated formula or exclusive marketing secret. They found that whether it's a life-changing lesson or a catchy jingle, sticky ideas share some surprisingly simple
And
traits.
the best part,
We can use these principles ourselves to learn more effectively and get our point across better no matter what we're passionate about.
absolutely. And one of the first things that jumped out at me was the power of surprise.
Hmm.
Now, before you think we're just talking about throwing in random plot twists, the Heaths argue that real stickiness comes from what they call breaking the guessing machine. Essentially, it's about disrupting expectations in a way that makes the message memorable.
Exactly. Think about that Enclave minivan commercial, the one where a peaceful family outing ends in a horrific crash.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
It's definitely memorable, but does it effectively sell minivans? Not so much. There's a difference between a cheap gotcha moment and the kind of surprise that makes us pay attention for the right reasons.
So how do we make sure our surprises hit the mark then? Because it does feel like a delicate balance, right? You want to surprise people, but not completely turn them off to your message.
Right. That's where meaningful, insight-driven surprise comes in.
Okay, so it's not just about tricking the audience, but
Yeah.
about challenging their assumptions in a way that deepens their understanding of your core message.
Right. It's about giving them that aha moment.
Do you have an example of this in action? I think that would really help illustrate the point.
Absolutely. Think about Hoover Adams, a newspaper publisher who wanted to emphasize the importance of valuing young people. Now, he could have just said that directly, but instead, he shared a surprising fact. More obituaries in his newspaper were for young people than old.
Wow, that is unexpected. And a little bit morbid, but I see what you mean.
Exactly. And that unexpectedness made people stop and think about his message in a new light.
I get it. It wasn't a random shock tactic. It was directly relevant to his point about valuing youth.
This is what makes certain ideas stick. They surprise us in a way that connects to something deeper, something we can all relate to.
It makes you realize how easily we slip into accepting the expected and tune out potentially powerful messages in the process. Okay, so we've got surprise. What's another element that makes an idea sticky?
Well, the Heath brothers also highlight the importance of concreteness.
This one really resonated with me.
Think about how often you hear corporate jargon like world-class customer service and think, okay, but what does that even mean? Give me an example. Our brains crave tangible details.
It's like they're trying to hand us a plate of abstract concepts when what we're really hungry for is a juicy burger of an idea.
That's a great way to put it. Made to stick actually gives a great example of this with, again, Nordstrom,
Okay.
which is more likely to stick with you. The phrase world-class customer service or a vivid image of a Nordstrom employee ironing a customer's shirt.
The ironing for sure. It's something I can easily visualize and remember.
It makes that vague idea of world-class service feel real.
Exactly. And that's the power of concreteness. It helps us grasp onto abstract ideas, especially if the topic is new to us. It's like building a bridge from the unfamiliar to the familiar. Instead of being intimidated, you have something concrete to hold on to.
It's like learning a new language. You don't start with Shakespeare, right?
Now you start with basic vocabulary and concrete examples.
And then you can slowly build up to more complex grammar and abstract ideas.
That's a fantastic analogy. In fact, the book shares a similar example from a programming teacher named Bjorn Holt.
He was trying to explain the idea of variables to his students.
Interesting.
Instead of getting lost in technical terms, he used a simple analogy that everyone could understand. Variables are just like cups. They're a container that holds some information. He even gave each student a different type of cup to represent different types of data genius.
I love that. It's concrete, it's visual, and it takes a potentially intimidating concept and makes it instantly relatable.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of using concreteness. It's not about dumbing things down. It's about creating those essential hooks for understanding. It's about meeting people where they are and giving them something they can grab hold of. You know, when we talk about making ideas stick, we can't forget the power of emotions.
This one feels a little tricky, doesn't it? I mean, whenever you hear emotions in the context of getting your message across, it's easy to jump to manipulation tactics.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get that concern. But that's not what Made to Stick is advocating for. It's not about tricking people with cheap emotional appeals. It's about recognizing that we're all human and we connect with ideas that resonate with our own experiences, with our emotions.
So it's less about pulling heartstrings and more about tapping into those genuine human experiences to make your point hit home.
Exactly. Take, for example, the story of the Rokia letter. It's about a young girl in Mali struggling with poverty. The Heath brothers found that sharing this personal narrative with potential donors led to way more contributions than simply presenting people with dry statistics about poverty in Africa.
Right, because statistics can feel so overwhelming and impersonal. But with Rokia's story, you put a face to the problem. It becomes relatable, almost impossible to ignore.
Right, and the Heath brothers have a name for this, the Mother Teresa principle. It's the idea that if I look at the one, I will act. We're far more likely to be moved to action by the needs of a single identifiable person than by abstract masses.
It's interesting, isn't it? Our brains are practically wired for that kind of empathy, for
What?
wanting to help when we can connect on a personal level. It makes you think about how you can bring that same kind of emotional resonance into your own communication.
Absolutely. And the takeaway here isn't about manipulation. It's about finding those genuine human connections that make an idea matter, that make it stick with people long after they've finished listening.
Now, speaking of connecting with people, let's talk about the power of stories.
Yeah.
I'll admit, when I first picked up Made to Stick, I thought, okay, stories are great, but how often do we really encounter those epic, life-changing narratives? But then they brought up something as simple as shop talk, and it just clicked.
Ah, yes. Like that example of the Xerox technicians getting excited about a Decoratron problem.
Exactly. It might sound totally mundane to anyone outside that world, but to them, it was engaging, relatable, and it helped them troubleshoot and solve a real problem together.
And that's because stories, even the seemingly ordinary ones, provide context, right? They let us simulate experiences and learn by doing, even if it's just mentally. There's this fascinating study mentioned in the book where readers were asked to visualize a story about a character taking off his sweatshirt before going for a jog. Those who pictured him leaving it at home actually mentally placed that sweatshirt further away in their minds than those who imagined him taking it off at the park.
Wait, so just reading a simple story can create that kind of mental simulation of events and locations? That's wild.
It is. And this power of mental simulation even extends to problem solving. Another study found that students who mentally rehearsed the steps involved in solving a problem were more successful when they actually had to tackle the real thing. It's like our brains benefit from a dress rehearsal, even if it's all happening in our imaginations.
So it's not just about entertainment. Stories are powerful tools for learning and truly engaging with ideas, no matter what the subject is. It makes me think about how I can weave more storytelling into how I explain things at work, especially if I can help my colleagues mentally rehearse solutions.
Exactly. And when you combine the power of storytelling with the other elements we've discussed, simplicity, unexpectedness, concreteness, credibility, you've got a recipe for crafting truly unforgettable ideas. And speaking of recipes, this actually brings us back to the SexIS framework itself. It's like the Heath brothers have given us this incredibly useful checklist for making our messages stick.
Okay, so let's recap the SexIS framework. We've got simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and stories. It's interesting to think about how these principles could apply to any message you want to get across, whether you're a teacher, a CEO, or just someone trying to convince their friends to try a new restaurant.
Exactly. And that's what I find so compelling. It's not just for marketing gurus or professional speakers. Made to Stick makes a strong case that anyone, in any field, can use these principles to communicate more effectively.
Like that example of the teacher who used a mystery to teach DNA analysis. Instead of just lecturing on the science, she presented her students with a puzzle. Who was stealing food from the petting zoo? Talk about making science come alive. By analyzing DNA evidence, the students got to be detectives while learning some pretty complex stuff.
What a brilliant way to engage students. And it makes you think, how could you apply the 6CS checklist to your own life? Think about a concept you'd love to explain more clearly or a project you're passionate about. Could you make it simpler, more surprising, more concrete? Could you tell a story that brings it to life?
It's a challenge, for sure, but it's also an incredible opportunity. Even small tweaks, guided by these principles, can make a world of difference in how our ideas are received and remembered. And when you really nail it, you can create some truly amazing aha moments for your audience.
It's almost like we need to apply the CS framework as a filter for all the information coming at us.
Yeah, how do we sift through all the noise and figure out which ideas are not only sticky, but actually worthwhile? It's tough.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And while Made to Stick doesn't claim to have all the answers,
Right.
it does give us a framework for becoming more conscious about the information we consume and share.
So it's not just about making any ideas stick.
Right.
It's about making sure the right ideas are the ones that stick with people.
Exactly. It challenges us to be more discerning, more critical, more intentional about how we engage with this world of ideas we're swimming in.
And maybe a little more aware of our own biases, those guessing machines running in the background of our minds that can sometimes lead us down the wrong path.
I think that's a really important takeaway from this deep dive. Made to Stick isn't just a guide to communication, it's an invitation to think more deeply about how we learn, how we share, and ultimately how we make sense of the world around us.
It reminds us that ideas have power, for better or for worse.
And that puts the responsibility squarely on our shoulders to be thoughtful, informed, engaged citizens of this landscape of ideas.
So as you head back out into the world, armed with these secrets of stickiness, remember to use that knowledge wisely.
Absolutely.
Find the ideas that truly matter, make them stick, and who knows, maybe we can make the world a little stickier for the better.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the endless possibilities of sticky ideas. Until next time, happy learning, everyone.